Hello and welcome to Research Academy's YouTube channel. Today we will quickly talk about the ALET PG paper which was held yesterday. So we will talk about how was the paper, what were the expected and unexpected areas, and they've also released the provisional answer key so you guys can also raise objections till tomorrow 8 a.m. So go through the paper, look at the answer key and see if you think any question is incorrect. Meanwhile, in this video, I will be talking about a brief overview of the paper as well as I will tell you whether any answer is incorrect in the provisional key or not. But first things first, the submission for objections is already open. So make sure that you submit it by tomorrow 8 a.m. because that is when the submissions will close. So this is of utmost importance that you go through the paper again and check if there is any problem in it. Now coming to the paper itself, the difficulty level of the paper was quite easy to moderate. So ALET had changed the pattern this year because up until last year they used to ask English as well. The number of questions were more. So they realized that it is a very lengthy paper to be solved in the duration like this. So they have now changed the pattern to only 100 MCQs, which made the paper very doable. It wasn't very lengthy. And if we look at the kind of questions that were asked, they were also easy to moderate. So it was not a difficult paper. So definitely the cutoff will remain high. Now coming to the areas from which questions have come. So it was a very balanced paper just like CLAT PG paper this year because they tried to ask holistic questions from almost all aspects of law. So basically apart from CPC, they have tested almost every other area which is important in your legal 5 years course that you study. So questions were from the basics of those subjects and also from your understanding of the intention of those subjects. So primarily the questions were from Constitution of India. So the bulk of questions were from this, but they were very easy to moderate direct questions from the Bare Act. Then we had easy questions on jurisprudence. In criminal law, we had questions from IPC, CRPC, as well as evidence law. So there was a equitable distribution between these three areas. Questions from public international law were slightly moderate to difficult. They were definitely not very easy, but PIL could be said to be the only difficult area in the paper. Then we had a few questions on environmental law as well. Few questions were from family law. Few basic questions were also from labor law. They also asked 2-3 questions on arbitration law, which were again very easy. 1-2 questions were asked from the tort law as well with respect to malicious prosecution. Then they also asked some 3-4 questions on IPR. So in IPR also they had asked very basic conceptual questions of intellectual property rights. Then they also asked commercial areas, so they tested your contract law as well as knowledge of company law. Lastly, apart from all this, there were also some subjects from which one question each was asked. So if we look at it, there was one question from the POSH Act with respect to the constitution of internal committee. Then there were two questions from Transfer of Property Act. There was one question from Sale of Goods Act. Then there was one question from Partnership Act. One question was from Consumer Protection Act. And one question was also about the interpretation of taxation statutes. So as you can see, the paper, even though it looks like they've asked a lot of subjects, but the questions were very conceptual and very primary questions that are supposed to be asked from any of these given areas. So overall, the difficulty of the paper was not very high, even though they had tested areas which students were not expecting. Now coming to the gist of it as to what were they trying to test. So if we look at the paper, it was not reasoning based paper. It was not a paper in which they were asking a lot of judgments, whether recent or landmark. So they actually tested very basic concepts and also your holistic understanding of that subject. So whether you have understood the gist of the subject or the intention of the lawmaker or not, that was the primary purpose of this particular year's ALET PG exam. Now let's also see what were the surprise elements because like every year, CLAT and ALET have some surprise areas which candidates are not expecting. So the first surprising thing was that there were less reasoning based questions because ALET is known for asking assertion and reasoning questions. So in this year's paper, and assertion reasoning also makes the paper a little bit lengthy for students because they have to apply their legal principles to a hypothetical. But this time there were not many reasoning based questions, which made the paper a little easy also, a little less subjective also, and also little less lengthy so that students could have finished their whole paper within time. And next things that was surprising was the questions from Sale of Goods Act, POSH Act, uh, even from Transfer of Property Act. Although questions from these subjects were very basic, so even if you could not answer them, there's nothing to worry about because they didn't ask too many questions from these areas. Now coming to the overall impression of the paper, the first very important thing was that the paper was not very lengthy because it was not comprehension based. There were not many reasoning assertion based questions. So the paper was very doable. Second thing was that there were easy conceptual questions. So if your concepts are good, you would have performed really good in this paper because they did not want you to mug up sections, or they did not want you to mug up cases, whether landmark or recent. So they tested very basic understanding of the subjects. And next thing is that they tested your overall legal knowledge because they had asked questions from almost every area of law, including Arbitration Act, POSH Act, criminal law, constitution, jurisprudence, PIL. So they were trying to test your overall understanding of law, something which you have read in your 5 years. So it was not something which they were testing that how much you've prepared in the last 2 3 months. It was more of a overall understanding of how you have studied law in general. Now let's come to the provisional answer key. Now the provisional answer key seems to be correct. There doesn't seem to be any incorrect answers in it. And the primary reason for that is that most questions were very direct. So since there was no subjectivity in the questions, although there were 2 3 questions which were a little subjective in PIL, in jurisprudence, but overall the questions were very direct and objective in nature, and hence the provisional answer key is mostly correct. But if you guys think that there is any question which you think is wrongly marked in the provisional answer key, do let us know in the comment section and we will look into it. Wishing you all the very best for your result. Do let us know how you perform. If you like this video, please like and share and subscribe to our YouTube channel.